Jacob Fatu rushed to emergency surgery after Drew McIntyre's vicious assault. WWE trying to cover up the severity. Listen, I need you to sit down for this because what I'm about to tell you is going to make your blood boil. WWE has been lying to your face. They've been downplaying what really happened to Jacob Fatu, and I've got sources inside the company who are furious about how this is being handled. While WWE puts out their sanitized PR statements, Jacob Fatu is in a hospital bed right now, recovering from emergency surgery because Drew McIntyre took things way too far. And here's the kicker, management knew this was going to happen and they did nothing to stop it. Let me paint you the full picture of what went down, because the version you saw on television, that's the PG-rated, family-friendly edit. The reality is so much worse, and WWE is desperately trying to control the narrative before this turns into their biggest liability scandal since, well, we'll get to that. Jacob Fatu, the most dominant force to hit WWE in years, the Samoan werewolf himself, is now sidelined indefinitely. Not because of a worked injury, not because of a storyline, but because Drew McIntyre legitimately injured him in what can only be described as a premeditated attack that crossed every line in professional wrestling. And WWE's response? Silence. Damage control. Corporate spin. Here's what actually happened backstage that night, and trust me, this information comes from multiple sources who were there, who saw everything, and who are absolutely disgusted with how WWE management has handled this situation. The attack you saw on camera was brutal enough, Drew McIntyre using that steel chair over and over, targeting Fatu's leg, his ribs, his back. But what you didn't see was the 20 minutes before cameras started rolling. What you didn't see was Drew McIntyre pacing back and forth in gorilla position, psyching himself up, talking about how he was going to end Jacob Fatu's push. What you didn't see was multiple producers trying to talk him down, trying to get him to stick to the script, and Drew just brushing them off. According to my sources, the original plan was for a standard beatdown, maybe 3 chair shots, some trash talk, and then security would break it up. That's what was scripted. That's what Jacob Fatu agreed to. But Drew McIntyre had other plans, and when someone of his tenure and political capital decides to go into business for himself, there's very little anyone can do to stop it in the moment. The first chair shot was harder than it should have been. My source told me you could hear it echo differently, that sickening sound that every wrestler dreads, the sound that means someone didn't protect their opponent. Jacob Fatu, being the absolute professional that he is, stayed in position. He trusted his opponent. He trusted that Drew would dial it back. That trust was shattered with every subsequent shot. By the 5th chair shot, producers were screaming in Drew's earpiece to wrap it up. By the 7th, Adam Pearce was literally running from his office to stop it. By the 10th shot, Jacob Fatu's leg had taken so much legitimate damage that he couldn't stand properly, but the cameras kept rolling because, in WWE's twisted logic, this was great television. Let me tell you what happened the moment those cameras cut away. Medical staff rushed to Jacob Fatu's side, and what they found was horrifying. His left leg was already swelling to twice its normal size. He couldn't put any weight on it. His ribs were bruised so badly that he was struggling to breathe. And the look on his face, my source said it wasn't the face of a man selling an injury. It was the face of someone who had just realized their career might be in jeopardy. They got Jacob backstage, away from the crowd, away from the cameras, and that's when the real panic set in. The initial examination revealed what everyone feared. This wasn't just bruising. This wasn't just going to heal with some ice and rest. Jacob Fatu needed immediate medical attention, and WWE had a choice to make. Do they send him to a local hospital and risk the story getting out, or do they try to handle it quietly? They chose quietly. Of course they did. They always do. Jacob was transported to a private medical facility that WWE has used before for situations they want to keep under wraps. And here's where this gets even more infuriating. WWE made Jacob Fatu sign additional non-disclosure agreements before they would authorize the medical care he needed. Let that sink in. A man is injured because of negligence and recklessness in their ring, and they're making him sign away his right to talk about it before they'll help him. The surgery happened within hours. The details I've been given indicate that Jacob Fatu suffered significant soft tissue damage to his left leg, including a partial tear of his quadriceps tendon. For those who don't understand the severity of that injury, we're talking about months of recovery, extensive physical therapy, and no guarantee that he'll ever move the same way in the ring again. The Samoan werewolf's explosive athleticism, the thing that made him special, might be permanently compromised. But the leg wasn't the only concern. The repeated chair shots to his torso resulted in 2 cracked ribs and significant bruising to his intercostal muscles. Every breath Jacob Fatu takes right now is painful. Sleeping is nearly impossible. And all of this could have been prevented if Drew McIntyre had just stuck to the script, or if WWE officials had the backbone to pull the plug on the segment when it became clear things were going wrong. Now, let's talk about Drew McIntyre's role in all of this, because this is where the story gets really complicated. Multiple sources have told me that Drew has been frustrated for months. He feels like his return to WWE hasn't been booked strong enough. He's bitter about losing to CM Punk at their last encounter. He's angry that younger talent like Jacob Fatu are being positioned ahead of him in the pecking order. And that frustration boiled over into reckless, dangerous, unprofessional conduct. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, Drew McIntyre showed no remorse. According to people who were there, he walked back through the curtain, threw the chair down, and said, "That's how you make someone look weak." Not, "Is he okay?" Not, "Did I go too far?" Just pure ego and vindictiveness. WWE has kept Drew away from Jacob since the incident. They haven't been in the same building, the same city, or even the same state for any shows. And that's not because of storyline reasons, that's because WWE is genuinely concerned about what might happen if these two are in proximity to each other again. Jacob Fatu's family, his bloodline brothers, they're furious. Jimmy USO, GUSO, Solo Sikoa, they all want revenge, and WWE is desperately trying to keep a lid on this situation before it explodes into something they can't control. Here's what makes this even more maddening: WWE is spinning this as part of the storyline. They're pretending that Jacob Fatu's absence is planned, that the injury is worked, that this is all building to some massive return and revenge angle. But the reality is they have no idea when Jacob Fatu will be cleared to compete again. The doctors can't give them a timeline because the full extent of the damage won't be known for weeks. And what about Drew McIntyre? Has he been suspended? Has he been fined? Has there been any consequences whatsoever for his actions? According to my sources, absolutely nothing has happened to him. He's still working full-time, still getting his television time, still collecting his paycheck. Meanwhile, Jacob Fatu is at home, unable to train, unable to work, unable to support his family in the way he's accustomed to, all because someone decided to be selfish and reckless. This isn't the first time something like this has happened in WWE, and it won't be the last. But what makes this situation particularly egregious is that everyone saw it coming. People backstage knew that Drew McIntyre was in a bad headspace. They knew he was frustrated. They knew pairing him with Jacob Fatu in a segment involving weapons was a risk. And they did it anyway because WWE's philosophy has always been the show must go on even when it endangers their performers. Let me share something else my sources told me. There was a meeting after the incident where WWE officials discussed how to handle the public relations aspect of this. Not how to prevent it from happening again. Not how to support Jacob Fatu through his recovery. But how to spin it so that WWE doesn't look negligent. That tells you everything you need to know about where their priorities lie. The recovery timeline for Jacob Fatu is estimated at 4 to 6 months minimum, but that's assuming everything goes perfectly with his rehabilitation. Quad tendon injuries are notoriously tricky, especially for athletes who rely on explosive movements. Jacob Fatu's entire wrestling style is built around his agility and power, his ability to move like someone half his size while hitting like a truck. If that's compromised, if he comes back and he's even 10% slower or less powerful, it could fundamentally change what made him special. And let's talk about the psychological impact of all this. Jacob Fatu trusted his opponent. He trusted the company. He trusted the system. And all of that trust was violated in one moment of selfishness. How does he come back from that mentally? How does he ever fully trust another opponent again? How does he step into that ring knowing that WWE will prioritize television moments over his well-being? The wrestling community has been mostly silent about this, and that silence is deafening. Where are the other wrestlers speaking up? Where are the locker room leaders demanding accountability? The silence suggests that either people are too afraid to speak out against WWE and someone as established as Drew McIntyre, or they've been told explicitly to keep quiet. Either option is unacceptable. What's even more frustrating is how WWE fans have been kept in the dark about all of this. The company releases vague statements about Jacob Fatu recovering from injuries sustained in an attack, but they never acknowledge the full severity, they never explain why it happened, and they never hold anyone accountable. WWE counts on their audience having short memories, on people forgetting about incidents like this by the time the next pay-per-view rolls around. But we can't let this slide. We can't normalize this kind of reckless behavior. We can't accept a system where performers are put at risk because someone decided to go into business for themselves. Jacob Fatu deserves better. Every wrestler deserves better. They put their bodies on the line to entertain us, and the absolute least we can demand is that the company takes their safety seriously. This entire situation raises bigger questions about WWE's culture. How many other incidents like this have happened that we don't know about? How many wrestlers have been hurt because someone was working too stiff or being reckless? How many injuries have been covered up or downplayed to protect the company's image? The fact that WWE's first instinct was damage control rather than accountability tells you everything about their priorities. Jacob Fatu's surgery was successful, thank God, but now comes the long road to recovery. He'll spend months in physical therapy, working to regain the strength and mobility he had before. He'll deal with the mental aspect of coming back from a legitimate injury in an industry where toughness is currency. And through all of it, he'll have to watch Drew McIntyre continue wrestling like nothing happened. Because in WWE's eyes, nothing did happen. It was just another day at the office. The Samoan werewolf will return. Jacob Fatu is too talented, too tough, and too determined to let this be the end of his story. But he shouldn't have to come back from something that never should have happened in the first place. This was preventable. This was predictable. And WWE's failure to prevent it is inexcusable. So what happens now? We wait. We watch. And we demand better. We demand transparency about what really happened. We demand accountability for those responsible. We demand systemic changes to ensure this never happens again. Because if we don't, if we just accept this as part of the business, then we're complicit in creating an environment where wrestlers are expendable and their safety is negotiable. Jacob Fatu underwent surgery because someone prioritized their ego over his well-being. That's the truth WWE doesn't want you to know. That's the story they're trying to bury under storylines and corporate speak. But the truth has a way of coming out, and when Jacob Fatu returns, and he will return, I hope he comes back to a company that's learned from this disaster. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this video. Let WWE know that we're watching, we're paying attention, and we won't accept this kind of negligence. Jacob Fatu deserves justice, and we're not going to stop talking about this until he gets it.